I'm going to tell you something you already know. We live in a big, congested city. But what's wonderful about living in this big, congested city is there's always something interesting going on around town. If you are bored in Los Angeles, should probably check your pulse. And there's just an incredible resource of even Jewish experiences. I was with someone, an Israeli parasports athlete came to visit our elementary school kids, and we took him to lunch, and we were talking, and he's actually going to school in Arlington, Texas. And and he was there when October 7th happened, and he was lamenting the fact that he said, I'm the only Jew in the city. I'm not sure if that's true, but that's what he feels. And it's just amazing that we're in this city of 650,000, and the vast resources we have, but also the sense of community that we can feel from knowing that there are so many opportunities that have so many experiences that have Jewish content to them that we can really enrich our lives. And I say that because what I'm going to share is the result of some experiences I had over the past couple of weeks, where I was able to listen to some folks share really some inspirational reflections on events in the world around us. As a clergy person, we have a front row seat to celebration and sorrow and mourning. And what I've come to understand over the years is that everybody processes those experiences dramatically differently. Now, that's obvious, of course, but what I've also discovered is that we don't always recognize that in other people, that we project our own way of feeling onto others and expect that they might respond the way we do. So we might say words that comforted us, and we'll say it to them and wonder why they didn't land the way we thought they'd land. Or we may decide that so-and-so didn't process that event the way they should have. Because after all, that's the way I would have processed it. Why didn't they process it? And I think that tendency has been particularly, and it's a human tendency, it's natural, and we have to work to overcome it, but it exists. And I think it's been especially apparent on a communal scale in how we've reacted to October 7th, the atrocities of October 7th. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not talking about those who are hostile to Israel. That's a whole other issue. I'm talking about those of us who are connected to Israel, committed to Israel. But nonetheless, we all respond to those atrocities differently, just as we respond differently to personal life events. It evokes, October 7th, a wide range of legitimate and uniquely personal reactions. So I'm sharing that with you, not to make excuses for anyone, but rather to provide a context for what you're going to hear next. I'm going to tell you about 4 experiences of 4 different people, actually 5 different people, but 4 different scenarios, after October 7th. Stories as told by Israelis and Palestinians. In a dark and often devastating world, I find hope in these stories. That's why I'm sharing them with you. They sadden me, and they lift me up at the same time. They may be only tiny candles in a very dark world, but they are the light nonetheless. So let me start with the account of some Israelis who lost loved ones during October 7th. I have a principle when I sit in the presence of survivors of that horrible day. I believe it's my obligation to bear witness, to listen, to be fully present without judgment, and to soak in what they say and have it form a part of my memories, integrated into my memories of October 7th, and carry it forward with me throughout my life. So recently, and this is why I'm talking about all the events going on in our city, I had the opportunity to sit in a small group with the Goldberg-Poland family. That's John and Rachel. Their son, Hirsch, if you know, was abducted from the Nova Music Festival. And he was murdered by Hamas after 11 months in captivity. So sitting in the presence of those 2 people and hearing the way that they speak about the experience and what they've taken away from it was one of the most profound experiences I can remember in a long time. And I came to the conclusion that if the legend of the Lamed Vavniks, the 36 righteous people that uphold our world, and as long as they exist, the world continues, I was sitting in the presence of two of them. From very early on, John and Rachel became the public voice for the hostages. They spoke memorably at the Democratic National Convention. They give frequent interviews to news sources. They speak eloquently. They speak passionately. And they speak without reservation about the single-minded purpose they have, which is to bring the hostages home. They did it while their son was alive and in captivity, and they continue to do it even though his body was brought home. Notably, in their public appearances, they avoid criticism of Israeli politicians, but they're resolute in their insistence that the first deeply Jewish priority has to be to bring home those living hostages and to bring the bodies out of Gaza for their families to have proper burials of those who have not survived. But beyond that, which is powerful, an additional profound message they brought to this group that I sat with was about their own search for meaning in the face of the loss of their son. And they spoke with humor and poignancy, and maybe they didn't cry, but I can tell you that I did. And they referenced their son's admiration for Viktor Frankl. Their son read the book Man's Search for Meaning, and it was in their house. And so after he died, after Hirsch was killed, they reread the timeless words. And as they were processing their own way, and it was actually an interview, and so during the interview, someone said, "How do you endure? What keeps you going?" And they said that the reason that they're so single-mindedly committed to sharing their son's story and advocating for the hostages is through the quote that Viktor Frankl gave in the book, the one that for them was the important quote. And they said, "Those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how." So I'm going to read it again. You can look it up also. "Those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how." It's on the internet in a couple of different forms that all capture the similar flavor. But I will remember those words, hearing it from the Goldberg Polands for as long as I live. Because the fact that they were able to find renewed meaning and purpose in their life once they had a why is so profound, and they are living out that reality. That is a candle of light that burns in the darkness. The next vignette was at a different event. It was told to us by Mor Yinon. She spoke at the Skirball Center this week. She's an Israeli high-tech entrepreneur. Almost seems redundant to say Israeli high-tech entrepreneur, but she was another one. From Tel Aviv, her parents were killed on October 7th in their home at Moshav Netiv HaAsara. Their bodies were burned so completely that her mother's body wasn't identified for about 10 months after. Her father was an agronomist, a farmer scientist. Her mother was a kindergarten teacher. The last time they were together was October 6th, when they gathered for the last night of Sukkot. Her parents decided to go late back to their house, so they drove to the Moshav at midnight. They went to bed thinking they'd wake up in the morning, obviously. Within hours of the attack, Mor and her family, and she has kids, a husband, and sisters and siblings in Israel, they learned that there were no survivors on that Moshav. And in a tragically ironic, I don't know if the right word is twist of fate, what you want to call it, her parents, her father especially, had always expressed a desire to be cremated, contrary to Jewish tradition. Why? Because he was an agronomist. He loved the land of Israel. He didn't want to occupy space with a casket. He believed the land should be available for those who live. So this man, unfortunately, his demise was met with a final cremation by hands that did not love him. So knowing that there were no survivors, her family decided to sit Shiva immediately. She said that probably they were actually the first family in Israel to sit Shiva after October 7th. So in her grief, subsequently, a couple of months later or so, she turned to an organization that she had heard of, Parents Circle Family Forum. It's a network of over 800 families, Palestinian and Israeli, who are all mourning the loss of loved ones from conflict in the sacred Holy Land. And the group is committed, they say on their website, to peace and reconciliation, to humanization of the other, and to mutually supportive mourning of their losses. She joined that group because, in her words, I was determined to turn my mourning and my parents' death into the pursuit of reconciliation and peace. That's my response to the trauma, she said. And she went on. Now, I've been judged by Israelis for my decision, but it's only made me more resolute in my determination to be a part of this group. A candle of hope burns in the darkness. The next two stories might be difficult for some of you to hear. Seema Mohammed Awad is 19. She hails from a village in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, the occupied territories, pick your term. She joined more on the stage at the Skirball. Her brother was killed by an Israeli soldier when he was 16, and she was just a child at that time. Her mother was so devastated by the loss that she temporarily lost her ability to display any affection, any love for her other children. She just shut down. An insistent neighbor repeatedly asked her to join the neighbor at Parent Circle Family Forum event. And she refused for months. She didn't want to sit with Israelis. And she spiraled deeper and deeper into her depression. And then finally, with no energy left to refuse this person, she went, a gathering of Israeli and Palestinian survivors. And as she witnessed Palestinians comforting Israelis and Israelis comforting Palestinians, she threw her reserve and her caution to the wind, and she shared her story. And it was at that point that my dear friend Robbie Damelin, who's been a founder of the group and has been a part of the group for decades, well, it's a decade and a half, reached over and put her arms around Seema's mother and embraced her. She didn't say anything, she just embraced her. So not only did Seema's mother become a regular at Parents Circle Family Forum events, but she then sent her daughter Seema into Israel to a Seeds of Peace camp. And Seema went, and she said, I went with rage in my heart and anger in my heart. And she was looking for someone to blame and to hate for the loss of her brother and for her mother's shutting down, her mother's withdrawal. But as she got there, something opened up in her. And she befriended other Israeli teens. And the other Israeli teens reached out to her. And just like her mother, that hate and that desire for revenge, it dissipated. And the two women, the mother and daughter, have restored their broken relationship. And so Seema travels with Parent Circle, and she speaks about her experience. And some of her neighbors accuse them of selling out their brother, their son's soul, because they go to this group where Israelis sit with Palestinians. And Seema told us what her mother says to them. She says, I'm not selling anyone's soul. I'm trying to save my children and yours. And so Seema, dressed fashionably and speaking articulately, sat on that stage. And I was struck by the fact that she was only a couple of years older than the 40 or so Milken High School students who were sitting on my left side who came to hear the message that these people brought. A candle of hope burns in the darkness. And here's my last story, though there are more. Leila Ashekh was also on the stage. She's a longtime participant in Parent Circle. She tells the story of her 6-month-old who was caught in a fusillade of tear gas, and the little infant's lungs couldn't handle the gas. And as the child had more and more trouble breathing and lapsed into unconsciousness, they raced into their car and they drove as fast as they could to the hospital, but they were stopped at a checkpoint. And no matter how hard they begged to be let go, the situation was such that they weren't allowed to pass. And by the time they got to that hospital, the child had died. And like Seema's mother, Layla had shut down. She refused to speak about her dead son at all to the rest of her family, and the anger and the rage simmered inside of her. And then finally, after 16 years, also a neighbor who had been pushing her to go to parent circle, finally convinced her to come to one of the gatherings. But she couldn't even comprehend getting into a room with her son's killers until she did. Though she thought she knew pain. She thought she knew Israelis. She thought her Palestinian pain overrode anyone else's. She was unable to recognize that Israelis too experience pain and loss until she entered that room, until she heard their stories and their accounts of fear. And when she witnessed Palestinians and Israelis putting their arms around each other in support, tears falling down the cheeks of each of them, she realized that Israelis were not the faceless soldiers and settlers that she saw as her abusers, but they were mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers with children, and they were human. And she also had her hardness broken. And now her other children know the story of their brother. She speaks about her 6-month-old. She speaks about the pain of loss to them. And she speaks about Israelis, not as killers of her child, but as friends and partners who helped her with her own mourning. And she tells her children, we, our family, will not be part of the cycle of violence and revenge and hatred. We will be voices for peace and reconciliation. A candle of hope that burns in the darkness. Some of you, like me, may find comfort in these stories. Others of you may not, and you don't have to. I mean it. You really don't. I am not here to judge. But I want to tell you that in the shadow of October 7th, in the anxieties and frustrations of Israel's longest war, these stories and the people who tell them, and there are many more than just these 5, these stories give me hope. And during very dark times, I watch as they bring hope to others. There were dozens at the Skirball. Thousands have heard the Goldberg Pollens speak. In about 2 weeks, we'll be sitting at our Passover Seders, our Starim. We'll be telling our story of enslavement and redemption, of crossing the narrow straits of Egypt and heading towards the hopefulness of the Promised Land. When I sit at my table and I look at my grandsons, 1-year-old and 2 years old, I'll be thinking of Layla and Moore and Seema and John and Rachel, and of my tireless octogenarian friend, Robbie Damelin, who started this group in the first place. Because for me, they are illuminating the way to the Promised Land. For me, they are candles of hope burning in the darkness. Can you hear that song? May it be.